Hello. Today I want to talk about the teaching of writing to Arab learners, and in particular, using learning outcomes in order to help us structure the course. Now, with any course, we need to start off thinking about where we are at the moment, A, and B, where do we want to be? And the third question is, how do we get from A to B? So it's the same with a writing course. So let's begin with A. Where are we? And there's no better place to begin than the classroom and the experience of the teachers. They are the people who know, in this case, what the abilities are of the students with regard to writing. So it's important to look at the reality of the classroom, not the expectations of others or what we would like the reality to be, but the reality of the situation. We also have to bear in mind the challenges that Arab learners face when they are learning to write in English. I'll just go over some of these, although they may well be familiar to you. So, why do Arab learners find writing difficult? First of all, there are linguistic factors. For example, it's a new script, which is a barrier at the beginning. It's left to right, there's upper and lower case. English is a Germanic language, so there are very few cognates with Arabic. The spelling, of course, is very irregular in English. And there are also difficulties with the English grammatical system, and so on. Cultural factors, well, we could say that traditionally in the Arab world there has been an oral culture, and maybe this is reflected still in the fact that some students are not good writers in their own language, in Arabic. Another factor is that in the modern world, there's a focus on other means of communication. It's almost as though a generation has skipped writing and moved on to these other ways of communicating. And then if we look at higher levels of writing, there are differences in rhetorical styles between Arabic and English. Also some pedagogical factors and educational factors. And generally in the region as a whole, I found that writing tends to be neglected as a skill compared with reading, listening, speaking, and so on. And this is sometimes reflected in the fact that there isn't a clear writing syllabus for the students to follow in schools, for example. It often tends to be a little bit random. And as a result, the materials are often not suitable because they don't have a concrete writing component. We may find also there's a lack of motivation amongst the students. They think, why do we have to learn to write in English? And also amongst some of the teachers who find writing is rather time-consuming, takes up classroom time, it takes up their time as well. And then there's a lack of training in specifically in teaching of writing, I feel. So that's where we are. Where do we want to be? Well, we think of students, they basically have two options. Of course, we want them to pass exams at the end of their school career, but they basically have two options. Either they go into further study, where English is a medium of instruction, or very often a medium of instruction, or they go into employment. And we could argue that in many professions, in many jobs, English is widely used as a means of communication. including written English. So when it comes to things like further study, what types of writing are necessary? Well, essays, reports, letters and emails, answers to examination questions, the writing of projects, perhaps in a group or individually, and then at higher levels, writing of dissertations and papers and so on. With employment, a vast range here, but we can say that messages, emails, letters are all very important. A lot of different types of report, going from business reports to incident reports, maintenance reports, lab reports, depending on the circumstances. Form filling, important, maybe. Examination answers, and maybe working on projects. So there we have A, which is the classroom. How do we get from where we are in the classroom to where we want the students to be in the work or further study environment? Well, the approach I like to use with writing, I'd call it a step-by-step approach. We divide it into a series of steps, and students move up a level, and when they are comfortable at that level, they move on to the next step, and so on. I like to use the metaphor or the analogy of climbing a mountain. When climbers want to get to the top of Everest, for example, or a big mountain, they don't go straight to the top and stop when they're tired. They go by a series of camps along the way. So they start off here at the base camp. They get to the base camp, they acclimatize, they get used to the conditions, they think about what's ahead, where they've come, the experience of where they've come from, and then they move on to the next camp when they are ready. And so on to the next camp and the next camp. And we see a number of camps along the way here. And then with a bit of luck, they eventually will get to the summit. So I think there are some parallels here with the writing program. We start off with, at the lowest level, with words and phrases, of course. You can't get anywhere without words and phrases. And also the rules that link the words together, that show the constraints on the particular words and how they're used. So that's very important at the lowest level. And then building up to a simple sentence, then to compound and complex sentences, and then basic paragraphs, simple paragraphs. I've also included extended paragraphs, I'll come to that. And then at the top, reports, essays and articles. Maybe that's our summit, where we want the students to get to in a particular period of time. I've highlighted simple sentences here and simple paragraphs, because I think these are very important steps or camps along the way. If a student can write a simple sentence, a very accurate sentence, accurate grammatically, with correct punctuation and the correct use of capital letters, I'm very, very happy, because I think that is a building block, and I'm going to change the metaphor a little bit here. So that's a block which is very useful for building further on. And similarly with paragraphs. So students will put their sentences together and be able to write a paragraph. And I'm very happy if students can write a paragraph which is cohesive, coherent, and accurate, because I think that's a very important block. From there, they can go on to write essays and reports and articles. If they can do one paragraph, they can do another and another and another. Of course, there are refinements that are necessary before they're able to write essays and reports, but it's a very important block along the way. So let's turn now to outcomes, and we'll start with some definitions here, taken from the British Council. What are they? Learning outcomes are statements of what a student should know, understand, or be able to demonstrate after completing a process of learning. And the important things, two important things here. First of all, they must be simply and clearly described, so we know exactly what they are, and there's no ambiguity. And secondly, they must be capable of being validly assessed. So we need to know when the students have achieved the outcomes. There must be an easy way of assessing that. So I've divided this up into 7 outcomes along the way, 7 steps, stages, or camps, if you prefer. And I'll go through them briefly, one by one, and give you a description of what they are. So students should be able to write simple sentences on a variety of topics. The sentences should be correctly formed and punctuated, okay? And the topics, well, we can choose our topics, maybe family and friends, sports and pastimes, work and study, and so on. The language, we might decide to restrict the language to verbs like be, have, like, study, and play, and just use the 2 present tenses, but perhaps add things like prepositional phrases of place. So how does this look like when we come to trying to achieve this outcome? Well, I very much like using these tables. English, as we know, is a sort of slot and fill language. There are a number of slots in a sentence that have to be filled in a particular order. And so a table lends itself to showing the students the structure and helping them to practice writing accurate sentences. So, for example, here, I like listening to music, my brother doesn't like Manchester United, and so on. And then some more sentences at the bottom here. Samira is studying medicine at Sultan Qaboos University. Here we're introducing a phrase. I like to use these terms who and what and where, but you might want to use more grammatical terms if you prefer. So you might say, well, where's the creativity? This is all rather mechanical. But my feeling is that at this low level, creativity can wait for later on. At this low level, we've got to focus on accuracy and getting the words in the right order and things like punctuation. Notice I leave a slot at the end of the sentence for punctuation. In any case, students are creating their own sentences about things, about people they know, for example, truthful sentences based on their circumstances. So that is useful. Let's go on to the next one, next outcome. Here we're moving up to compound sentences, and we're using the conjunctions and, but, and so. Again, sentences should be correctly formed and punctuated. So that's our outcome. Our topics, well, we can decide on what topics we want to cover now and what language points we want to include. Building on what has gone before, of course, but extending it. And this is how a syllabus is built up, by fleshing out the basic structure of the course. So compound sentences, they are basically putting 2 simple sentences together, joining 2 simple sentences. But there are implications with, for example, capital letters and punctuation. But also, for the first time, we start to introduce cohesion here. So Tony works in a bank during the day and he studies. Winters are long and cold in Russia, but summers, and using ellipsis here, no need to repeat summers in Russia, that's understood, and so on. And later on, Bhutan is a beautiful country, but it is very difficult to get there. So they're referring back to Bhutan. So they're moving up a level and they're learning something new as well. Now on to the third outcome, complex sentences containing subordinate clauses. Here I've just introduced the subordinators if, when, and because these are the most common and useful perhaps of the subordinators. Again, we would add in the topics and the language elements we thought suitable, building on what has gone before. And we've got our tables here to help us, to help guide the students, make it very clear. We've got two clauses, a main clause and a subordinate clause with the subordinator in the middle. And of course, we have the option of beginning the sentence with the subordinate clause, which has implications for punctuation. So those are the subordinators. And those are our sentences. We'll serve lunch in the tent if the weather is bad. The students were delighted when the university postponed their final exams, and so on. Okay, and here we see, for example, that there is some cohesion here, again. The students were delighted when the university postponed their final exams. Hamid decided to buy a new phone because there was a big discount on the price. The price of the new phones is understood. So we've got examples there of cohesion. So we're moving up a level and we're also expanding their knowledge of language. Outcome 4, now then, we're moving on to basic paragraphs. And I think this is quite a big step. Although these paragraphs only contain 3 sentences, but the important thing is, or 3 or 4 sentences, but the important thing is they're not just isolated sentences. These are sentences that are linked in meaning, and they are linked cohesively as well in terms of grammar and syntax and discourse markers. So this is quite an important step along the way. So, as I said, it's not just a list of simple sentences. Look at this little paragraph here. My brother Salman is a student at Dhofar University. He's studying computer science. Okay, and there we see the cohesion that makes this into a nice little paragraph that is cohesive and coherent as well. So his course refers back to computer science, the university refers back to Dammam University, and so on. Where's the creativity? Well, I don't think we can, still at this stage, we're more concerned with accuracy than we are with creativity. Although these students are writing about themselves, they're writing about people they know, so there is an element of creativity in this. So where are we on this scale? On the mountain, we're about there. So we've made some progress, but there's still a long way to go. Remember, we're sort of stopping at each stage, we're consolidating what we've done, and then we're getting used to the environment of where we are, and then we're moving on to the next level. So let's go on to short paragraphs. And these contain 5 or 6 simple and compound sentences. So we're moving up. It's a longer paragraph, and we're also making it more varied in terms of the sentence type. And the paragraph should demonstrate cohesion and coherence. So there we have our sentences. But again, they're not a list of sentences. They are connected. And hopefully a student would come up with a paragraph like this. If one of my students had come up with a paragraph like this, I would have been very, very happy. It's factual, it's informative, and it's cohesive and coherent as well. It's a nice description of a city, and they can write about their own cities, their own towns, and so on. Let's just look at it a little bit. So there are a couple of compound sentences, and there are the cohesive features there that make it into a nice paragraph. By the way, when we have a paragraph like that, I like to use this concept of noticing. So we can use the paragraph as a kind of linguistic tool. So we can point out certain things to the students, for example, these cohesive features, or we might want to focus on tenses or on phrases or whatever. We shouldn't overdo it, of course, but I think that is one of the useful tools that we have, taking a paragraph and getting students to notice certain features about it. Okay, well, let's press on. Now we're going on to extended paragraphs, and now we're going beyond 6 sentences. We could even divide the paragraphs into a couple of paragraphs as well. Not quite at the level of essay writing yet. So here's a paragraph, which is a kind of short biography of Steve Jobs, the founder, one of the founders of Apple. So he was an American inventor, designer, and businessman, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of information. It's all logically presented in terms of time. And there we have a number of compound sentences, these cohesive features, and then a couple of subordinate clauses as well along the way. Right, so finally, we come to outcome 7, which is a writing of essays. And I've chosen an opinion essay for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's very easy to structure an opinion essay. And secondly, I found, particularly teaching in Oman at the German university, that students had plenty of opinions, but they weren't very good at supporting their opinions. They weren't good at supporting them with reasons, evidence, examples, and so on. They tended to use emotion and exaggeration to make their point. So I think it's very a useful exercise to get them to think about things like reasons and evidence and so on. Here's a kind of course, there are many other types of essay and reports as well, but I think this is quite a good starting point. There's a kind of structure we can use for an opinion essay, so an introduction, and then a paragraph giving the main reasons, perhaps adding evidence and examples, even sources if they can. Perhaps a paragraph giving the opposing view and why the opposing view is wrong, and then the conclusion. Okay, so there we are. Those are the stages, the 7 outcomes that I've recommended. Useful way of structuring a writing course, particularly for Arab learners. And in terms of the mountain, well, we're up here somewhere near the summit, but we have to decide what we think the summit should be. Maybe it's something a bit more than that. Another way of looking at this, to change metaphors, what I've given you is a skeleton. So it shows the structure of the course, but then it's up to the course designers, of course, to add in, to flesh it out, to add in all of the other elements of the course, the topics, the language, the writing activities that will be used. And here we can think of, there are a lot of activities which can make writing more interesting, more interactive, and so on. And things which I would call marginal types of writing, rather than sentence writing, paragraph writing, essay writing. Marginal activities like keeping a diary, writing a short story, writing dialogues, and so on, writing invitations. these things can be motivational and can be fed in, but they don't provide a course in themselves. There's something to be added on. So there we need to expand on the skeleton to build a complete writing course. I'll just conclude by trying to answer this question. A lot of teachers, when I've done workshops, a lot of teachers ask this question: how can we improve our students' writing? So drawing on some of the points that I've made here, include a structured writing syllabus. And I favor this step-by-step approach, focusing on consolidation before moving on to another level. Have clear writing outcomes at each step, outcomes that can be clearly described and clearly assessed. Focus on grammar and syntax at the early stages, words and rules. It's very difficult to divorce writing from grammar and syntax at the early stages. It's so important. Make more classroom time for writing. There's a tendency to relegate writing to homework. And as I said, it tends to be neglected as one of the skills. So make more time, bring writing into the classroom. Use a variety of motivational classroom activities. And as I've looked at schools in the region, I find that a lot of teachers are very good at coming up with their own activities which make writing more interactive and more fun. And they share them, of course, with their colleagues. Incorporate suitable writing materials if they're not contained in the courses that you are given. So add in as you feel, if you can, as you think suitable. And then we ought to think about the training of teachers to teach writing effectively, so that they can, at least teachers can discuss the topic of teaching of writing and share their ideas. Right, I'll just finish by showing you some of the books that I've developed over the years. These are very low-level ones, Start Writing and Start Writing Sentences, meant for the Arab world. And at the very low level, they're produced by Canford Publishing. And then I've done these at higher levels, paragraph level, Keep Writing. This is a Longman book, and Better Writing. This is a book for Garnet. And then at the higher levels, the essay and report level, there are two levels of framework, which concentrate on academic writing and critical thinking. Framework first at the lower level, and then framework at the higher level. And they come with teacher's guides and photocopyable material and so on. So if you'd like more information about the books, please go to the website. And if you have any questions or queries, these are my email addresses. So thank you for your attention, and I hope this has been a useful video for you and will help you with teaching of writing to Arab learners. Thank you.